By Friday, everything will be in my name. That's what my husband whispered into his phone at 2 a.m., standing by our bedroom window, thinking I was still asleep. I wasn't. I hadn't been asleep in almost an hour. I lay there staring at the ceiling fan turning slow circles above me, and I did the only thing I could do. I listened, and I started counting the days. My name's Casey Whitlow. I'm 32 years old, and up until 3 weeks ago, I would have told you I had a good marriage. Not perfect. Good. The kind where you still make each other coffee in the morning, even if you don't always say much while you're doing it. I live outside a little town called Kettle Falls, Wyoming, population just under 2,000, if you count the Hendersons, twin boys who technically live in a trailer on their granddad's land but still claim residency in town for school purposes. It's the kind of place where everybody waves at everybody, whether they like each other or not, because that's just what you do out here. Wide open sky, more cattle than people, one gas station that closes at 9. The ranch was my father's before it was mine. 640 acres of hard, honest dirt that he built up from nothing starting in 1979. Back when he was 23 and had more debt than sense, according to my grandmother, I grew up on that land. I learned to drive a truck in that land. Learned to birth a calf in the mud at 3 a.m. in that land. Learned what it meant to lose something. When we buried my mother under the cottonwood tree at the edge of the north pasture, when I was 19. My father passed 4 years ago. Heart, sudden, no warning. He left the ranch to me. Not to my older brother, Cole, who'd moved to Denver and hadn't so much as fixed a fence post since he was 17. To me, because I was the one who stayed. I married Daniel 2 years after that. He wasn't from around here. He came out from Ohio for a construction job rebuilding the grain co-op after the fire, and he ended up staying a lot longer than the job did. He was funny, and he was patient with me during a time when I wasn't easy to be patient with, still grieving my dad the way I was. He learned how to work cattle even though he'd never touched a horse before he met me. My Uncle Ray used to joke that Daniel took to ranch life like a cat takes to a bathtub, which is to say badly, but he kept trying anyway. I loved him for trying. For a while, that was enough. But somewhere over the last year, something shifted. I couldn't have told you exactly when. It was small things at first. He started asking a lot of questions about the ranch's finances, which he'd never much cared about before. Whether the land was still just in my name, or whether we should simplify things now that we were married. He brought up my father's old will more than once, always sort of gentle about it, always framed like he was thinking of our future. Our kids someday. What happens if something happens to me? I didn't think much of it. That's what you tell yourself when you love somebody. You don't think much of it. Then, about 6 weeks ago, Daniel started taking calls outside. Long ones. He'd walk out to the barn, phone pressed to his ear, and if I came anywhere near, he'd lower his voice or just hang up altogether, saying it was work stuff, subcontractor stuff, nothing worth repeating. I believed him. I had 400 head of cattle to worry about, and a hay crop coming in late because of a wet spring. I didn't have room in my head to go looking for trouble. 3 weeks ago, a man I didn't recognize came out to the house while I was in town at the feed store. My neighbor, Dot Pruitt, mentioned it to me at church like it was nothing. Said he was driving a nice car, wore a suit, spent almost an hour inside with Daniel. I asked Daniel about it that night. He said it was an insurance adjuster. Said something about updating our homeowner's policy. I let it go. I wish I could tell you exactly what made me finally get up that Tuesday night. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was every one of those small things finally stacking high enough that even half asleep, some part of me heard my own front door creak open downstairs and thought, that's not right, and got my body moving before my mind caught up. I came down the hallway barefoot, quiet as I could manage on the old floorboards that Daniel still hadn't fixed even after I'd asked him twice. And that's when I saw him standing by the window in the front room, phone to his ear, voice low. By Friday, he said, everything will be in my name. I stopped in the hallway in the dark and I did not make a sound. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough that my feet went cold against the floorboards. Long enough that I heard the rest of it. No, she doesn't know anything. Daniel said. Quiet, careful. She trusts me. That's the whole point. A pause. Then, the lawyer said, as long as the paperwork's filed before the mineral rights hearing. Friday. It doesn't matter what she thinks she owns. It'll be done. Mineral rights. Those two words hit me harder than anything else he'd said. 18 months back, an oil company out of Cheyenne had come sniffing around the county, offering leases on anything with rock underneath it. My father, back when he was still alive, always swore he'd never sign with them. Said he didn't spend 40 years keeping cattle on that land, just to watch a rig go up in the north pasture. I'd honored that. Told the landmen no twice, politely, the way you do out here. I never told Daniel how much they'd offered. I never told him because it hadn't mattered. It was my land, my name, my father's word. Apparently, it had mattered to somebody. Friday, Daniel said again, and I heard something in his voice I hadn't heard before. Not nerves, excitement. Once the transfer's recorded, I signed the lease myself. She won't be able to stop it. I don't remember deciding to move. I just remember being back in the bedroom, lying flat on my back, heart going so hard I was sure he'd hear it from the front room. I stared at that ceiling fan turning its slow circles, and I made myself breathe. Normal, in out, like a woman asleep. He came up 10 minutes later. Slid into bed careful, like he always did when he thought I was sleeping, so as not to wake me. I felt the mattress dip. I felt his hand rest light on my hip for a second. The way it always did, and it took everything in me not to flinch. I lay there until his breathing went slow and even. And then I lay there a while longer after that, just to be sure. 3 days. That's what I had. 3 days until Friday. Until whatever paperwork he was talking about got itself filed somewhere. In the county recorder's office. And my father's ranch. The one thing in this world that had never once let me down would have somebody else's name stamped across the deed. I thought about waking him up right then, screaming at him, asking him to his face what in God's name he thought he was doing. I thought about it hard. But somewhere underneath the shock, something colder and steadier was already starting to take over. My father used to say you don't corner a rattlesnake unless you already know where it's going to strike. So instead, I closed my eyes and I started planning. The next morning, I made Daniel his eggs the way I always did. Over easy, toast on the side, and I smiled at him across the counter like the world hadn't cracked open the night before. I decided something in the dark hours before dawn. If he wanted to play a quiet game, I could play it quieter. As soon as his truck pulled out for whatever job site he was pretending to go to, I called the one person I trusted more than anybody left living. My father's oldest friend, a man named Walt Hargrove, who'd been the county's best land attorney for almost 30 years before he half retired, to a cabin up near Sheridan. Walt had drawn up my father's will. Walt knew this land better than the county assessor did. Casey, he said once I'd gotten it all out, my voice shaking more than I wanted it to. Slow down. Tell me again. Whose name is on the deed right now? Mine, I said. Just mine. It's always been just mine. Then nobody files a mineral rights lease on that land without your signature. Not a lawyer in this state could make that stick. Married or not, unless... He stopped. Unless what? Unless he's got you on something else. A power of attorney, something you signed and don't remember signing, or something you signed thinking it was for something else. I went cold all over again, because I did remember signing something. 2 months back. Daniel had put a folder in front of me one night after dinner. Said it was paperwork for a joint checking account. Something about combining our finances now that we'd been married 2 years. Made sense, he said, made things simpler. I remembered flipping through pages I didn't fully read. Tired after a long day working cattle. Trusting the man across the table. From me the way you trust somebody you sleep. Next to every night. Walt, I said, I think I need you to come look at something. He was at my kitchen table by noon, reading glasses low on his nose, going through every drawer of paperwork I owned while I stood behind him, arms crossed, watching him find, folder by folder, exactly how far my husband had already gotten, without me knowing a single thing about it. Walt found it on the 4th folder in. Not a joint checking account form. A limited power of attorney, giving Daniel authority to manage and transact on any property held in my name. Filed with the county recorder 11 days ago. My signature was right there at the bottom, real as anything, sitting under 3 paragraphs of legal language I'd never actually read. This is bad, Walt said, but it's not done. Not yet. A power of attorney can be revoked. Same day if we move fast. We moved fast. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, Walt had drafted a revocation and driven it himself down to the county recorder's office in Buffalo, wanting it filed and stamped before anybody with a different agenda got there first. By 3, he'd also filed something else, quietly on my behalf, formally withdrawing any pending mineral lease inquiry tied to my name, so there'd be nothing left for Daniel's lawyer to file even if he tried. I didn't say a word to Daniel that whole day. Made dinner. Asked about his job site. Watched him eat at my table, in my kitchen on my father's land, and smile at me like I was still the woman who didn't know anything. Thursday night, he got a phone call in the barn again. I watched him from the kitchen window this time in plain sight, not hiding at all. When he came back in, his face had gone the color of old ash. "Casey," he said, "we need to talk." "We do," I said. "But you go first. Tell me about Friday." I watched every excuse die in his throat before it reached his mouth. There wasn't one that was going to work anymore, and some part of him understood that immediately. He told me about the debts from before we met, ones he'd never mentioned. The man in the suit who wasn't an insurance adjuster at all, but a broker promising him a cut of a lease he had no legal right to sign. He told me he thought he'd fix it before I ever had to know. "You didn't want to fix it," I said. "You wanted it done before I could stop you." He didn't argue that part. He moved out that weekend. The divorce took 4 months, quiet and clean, because Walt made sure there wasn't a single piece of paper left, anywhere with Daniel's name anywhere, near my father's land. The ranch is still mine. All 640 acres of it, cottonwood tree and all. No rig went up in the north pasture, and none ever will. Not while I'm the one holding the deed. Some nights, I still lie awake and think about how close 3 days came to changing everything. But I've learned something out here that my father always used to say, and I finally understand it all the way through. Land doesn't lie to you. People do, and you'd best know the difference before Friday comes. If you've ever had somebody you trusted try to take something from you quietly, while you were looking the other way, you know exactly what those 3 days felt like for me. Tell me in the comments, would you have confronted him that same night, or would you have played it slow, the way I did? And if this story hit home for you, hit subscribe, because I've got more of these real ones coming. Land doesn't lie. People do. Don't ever forget that.